Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the CITRIS lecture series. My name is Ken Goldberg. I have the honor of introducing our speaker today. I also wanted to mention that both our speaker today and last week's speaker represent faculty who are working within one of the 6 themes within CITRIS. As you know, CITRIS is a broad organization that connects information technology to the interests of society. And one of the 6 themes is called Art, Technology, and Culture. So that looks particularly at artworks and cultural works that connect with information technology. So there's a theme there, there's information online, there's a lot of details. We also run another lecture series called Art, Technology, and Culture. And our first lecture for that will be a week from Thursday. And we're featuring Steve Kurtz, who's a very interesting, controversial figure who was actually arrested because of his work on bioart. So if you're interested in that, please look up atc.berkeley.edu, and there's information on those lectures. I also want to mention that we have that CITRIS has an event coming up next week, which is September 17th and 18th. It's a conference on the service of healthcare. And it's going to be held at the Berkeley City Club, which is over here on Durant Avenue, 2315 Durant. It's a broad conference looking at a variety of different technologies related to improving healthcare. And if you're interested in this, again, look at the CITRIS website. The details will be there, and you have to register. But I believe it's free. Is that correct? It's free for students. Okay, and I also just want to take a minute to thank Yvette. Have we done that recently? But we should give her a big round of applause because she's awesome and puts all these things together in the background. So our speaker today is Professor Sharon Daniel, and I've had the pleasure to know her for a number of years. She's a very well respected digital artist. She's a professor at Santa Cruz, and she's a founding member of something there called DANM, Digital Arts and New Media program, that involves artists and from a variety of different disciplines. She herself also has 2 MFAs. She has an MFA in art and also an MFA in music. So she's multi-talented, and her work has been shown around the world. She's one of the, say, top media artists in the world, very widely known. She showed at many venues, including University of Paris, the Dutch Electronic Arts Festival, Ars Electronica. She's shown at the Lincoln Center. She's traveled around the world to present her work, from New Delhi in India to Buenos Aires. She's been a very active panelist and supporter of the arts through her work and her innovative projects. And the one thing I would like to say that characterizes, I think, all artists are interested in representation, to represent the world out there in some way, and to share their perspectives. And one of the things that's interesting about Sharon is that she's interested in essentially taking a different strategy that avoids representation. And I'll let her tell you about that. All right, thank you.
Okay, so can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thanks. Well, first I want to thank Yvette and Ken for inviting me to come here, and for you all for showing up to have lunch while I talk to you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this type of art practice that I engage in, which is something a little bit different from traditional art practice. My work is located at the nexus of what are historically distinct practices and modes of knowledge production: art and activism, theory and practice. And underlying all my research is a commitment to participatory culture. I should be able to say that if I'm committed to it. In my scholarship, I write to theoretically contextualize the work that I do. And in my scholarship, I trace a thread through social theory that ties the potential for self-representation to social change. In my creative practice, I take hold of this thread. I see myself as a context provider, stretching the concept of artistic practice from content production to the making of a context. A context provider does not speak for others, but induces others to speak for themselves by providing both the means or tools and the context where they can speak and be heard. So what connects all my recent projects is a desire to effect social change. First, by providing technologically disenfranchised communities with access to media tools and information spaces, and second, by facilitating collective self-representation across socioeconomic boundaries. I think of the internet as a public space, and I see my work as public art. But I want to expand the definition of who constitutes the public in this context and create a more inclusive public sphere, both in the digital domain and in the physical domain. So, my work with participatory media follows on Wendy Ewald's early work with participant self-documentation using photography and is heavily influenced by Paulo Freire's approach to a pedagogy of self-analysis and self-determination. In 2005, I encountered a concept of the community computer. It was first proposed by an activist named Bruno Tardieu. For Tardieu, the community computer is a social and technological system, much like a typical computer, in which words can make things happen and associative memory evolves over time. While the personal computer that we all use and are familiar with provides a communications gateway to the internet where communities of interest can evolve regardless of distance, the concept of the community computer is intended not to bypass but to strengthen communities of place, particularly marginalized communities, and to enable and empower them. So this was the model for the project Palabras. Palabras means words in Spanish. Palabras is a set of tools and interfaces designed to facilitate collective self-representation. It's also an expanding network of ongoing collaborations with nonprofit organizations that serve marginalized communities. The Palabras website currently provides access to an archive of over 2,000 video clips that were created in Buenos Aires, Argentina, Kiel, Germany, San Francisco, San Jose, and Darfur in the Sudan. So I'm interested in new models of computing for different social contexts. Palabras was initially developed during a residency, 6 weeks in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and my goal for the residency was to work with community organizations in a kind of participatory design process in order to develop media and information technology tools that would be useful to residents in villas or squatter shanty towns in and around the city. I was interested in looking at context-appropriate models of computing and also of the use of media tools for the acquisition of media, and exploring the potential for media and information technology to facilitate participatory learning and communication across socioeconomic strata. So, oh, I forgot. I was going to show you this. So we were looking for, oh, where's my little camera? We were looking for context-appropriate media acquisition tools. The project concept required the use of an inexpensive video image capture device. And in 2005, we found this pure digital disposable video camera that was marketed through CVS pharmacies, and you were supposed to pay CVS like $30 for this camera, and then you would go and you'd shoot 20 minutes of digital video. You would take the camera back, you would give it to them, you would give them another $15, and they would give you a DVD with your video on it. Not a great deal, but a lot of people in the DIY technology community online figured out how to hack this camera to make it reusable. So on Make Magazine, they posted a kind of recipe for getting an old Palm Pilot serial cable, rewiring it, all the pictures are on Make Magazine, rewiring the head of the serial cable, and then putting a USB end on the other end, and then some people put together some software, some free software that you could download that helped facilitate kind of downloading the video onto your computer. clearing the chip, and then you could use the camera over and over again. So this was really important. Now this is a newer model of the camera, and it's a lot slicker and cooler than the ones we had in 2005, which were kind of funky. But basically I love this camera for this purpose because it looks like a stupid plastic toy, right? And I didn't want to go down there with fancy video cameras and hand them over to people in shanty towns who had, you know, would maybe think that the camera was more valuable than what they could make with it, okay? So anyway, we started with this camera, and then we made a web application that adopted the folksonomic or social classification method that would give participants the opportunity to interpret and classify their own content. So this is a little video that shows you the homepage for the current online version of the Pabas website. This is the public, what's publicly accessible, the browser where you can go to a particular community site and browse by folksonomic social classification the video that has been posted by participants in any particular community. The Pabas public browser interface really allows a global and international audience online to see the ways in which place-based communities describe their own social context, or that's the intention. The current version of the browser provides access to an archive of videos through tag clouds that visualize the folksonomies. And this is some video from Crear Vale la Pena, which is a nonprofit organization outside Buenos Aires that works with young people from a shanty town called La Cava on dance and music theater projects. They take young people who have dropped out of school and give them some reason to become reinterested in learning. The web application also provides a simple tag search, editing, and sequencing tools that participants use in the workshops to create video sequences using their own clips and those that are created by members of their own community. Participants can search for relevant clips from their site's list of tags. The web application is designed to facilitate the discovery of connections between participants' personal stories in the videos at each site and across cultures. So everybody's familiar with folksonomy and tagging, right? And YouTube and Flickr and all of those great sites. This is just a little demo of the Flash editing and sequencing tool that we built because we wanted to create a really, really simple, simpler than iMovie, simpler than any kind of video editing software you might find commercially available that would allow participants without training or familiarity with computer interfaces to easily interact and to create their own sequences and to collectively produce videos that represented their own community. Okay, so that's enough of that, I think. And you just see the different ways of browsing, and I'm going to go ahead and move through that. So Pabas is not another YouTube, Flickr, or MySpace. Now that's obvious because it's not as advanced or powerful or as pervasive as any of those sites, and particularly we haven't had nearly as much money to develop it. It's been done basically with a couple of internal UC arts-related grants from the UC Institute for Research in the Arts and from the Arts Research Institute at UC Santa Cruz. So it's a kind of low-cost version, but what really separates it from sites like YouTube and Facebook and MySpace is that it addresses communities of place and it focuses on collective authoring. So Pabas is intended as a tool for workshops in which groups are formed and collaboration is encouraged. Process is central and product is secondary. Workshops are often held at sites where there's no internet connection or computer lab, but the tagging and editing can be done on a laptop LAN, which we provide with the workshops, and then uploaded later to the project database by whoever is organizing the workshop. And this was the initial design for the project, as the first two sites where we worked, Crear Vale la Pena and Villa Tranquila, there was no computer lab and no net access available. So that was started in 2005 and worked through the Flash interfaces in 2006. And now we're working on a redesign and expansion of the project in a participatory design process with a project that's cross-cultural collaboration between Crear Vale la Pena in Buenos Aires and a group called Kiel Kreativ in Kiel, Germany, which is kind of a working class port town in the northern part of Germany. And they are engaging 4 schools in each city to use Pabas as a tool for making video and doing communication between, kind of cross-linguistic communication between those schools. So here's just a still of one of the parts of the new interfaces. The idea is to give participant communities the opportunity to generate their own skin, so that their part of the site looks like they want it to look, and to have better control of their community's representation and better access control, like privacy and so forth, to their community's videos, images, text, and sounds. The database is being restructured to allow more complex development of different kinds of projects within the umbrella of one community site. We're getting more social networking tools, comments, user group pages, forum, etc. So, and also we've developed an ability to export the video out of Pabas to YouTube or to DVD. So I just want to quickly show you that I didn't do this all by myself, obviously, even though I only had 2 tiny little grants. These are some people who worked on the project, and it's been developed in part within the context of collaborative research project groups at UCSC in the DANM program. And then these are some of the organizational collaborators who've done workshops in different sites internationally. So, and if there's time, I can tell you more about some of those workshops. But I wanted to move on to talk a little bit about the other aspect of my practice. So I'm involved in participatory media, but I'm also involved in what I call new media documentary, where I work with nonprofit organizations to engage with communities that don't have direct access to media and information technologies and can't have direct access to it because of restricted or extreme circumstances in which they live. And so I'm currently developing a series of new media documentaries that foreground the voices of the incarcerated and the addicted. They're called Public Secrets, Blood Sugar, and Capitalist Punishment. 6 years ago, I walked through a metal detector and into the Central California Women's Facility, which is the largest female correctional facility in the United States. And it really changed my life. The stories I heard when I was inside challenged all my notions and my most basic perceptions of justice, of freedom, and of responsibility. So I want to show you the project that's resulted from that experience. A $3 million razor wire fence separates California Correctional Women's Facility from the middle of nowhere. Its site is an agribusiness desert between Los Banos and Chowchilla, where there are 3 prisons within 30 square miles. Past the metal detector, through 2 electronic gates, under the gaze of the gun towers, there is an uncannily suburban, perfectly manicured lawn. Between the fence and the visiting room, I follow a rose-lined path surrounded by razor wire glinting in the relentless heat. This space is a counter site, intended to reinscribe the symbolic order of the space of the prison as safe, calm, domesticated. The prison is an anamorphosis, like the memento mori in Holbein's painting The Ambassadors, in which a smear or blot mars the illusion of 3-dimensional space. When seen from the proper perspective, a specific location outside the space depicted in the painting, this blot or smear resolves into the image of a skull. Recognition of the blot as skull reverses one's reading of the symbolic order of the painting. The lawn and rose garden are only visible to those who come to the visiting room from the outside, an orientation that is both physical and political. Inside, beyond the visiting room, The sun-baked yards are bare, treeless. There are no roses. Outside, beyond the edge of the agri-desert, impoverished communities of color are eviscerated, and the prison industrial complex expands. Despite the razor wire border, inside and outside indetermine each other. This is apparent in the way the prison acts back on the space outside it. Anyone, prisoner or police, who enters the space of the prison moves about in a zone of indistinction between outside and inside, exception and rule, licit and illicit, public and secret. This is a bit of a demo that we made with Vector's
Public
journal.
Secrets is a multivocal narrative that links individual testimony and public evidence, social theory, and personal statements in an effort to engage the public in a critical dialogue about crime and punishment, challenging the assumption that imprisonment provides a solution to social problems. The project, authored by Sharon Daniel and designed by Eric Lawyer, was an official honoree in the 2007 Webby Awards. Over 600 recorded statements of female prisoners incarcerated in California are displayed algorithmically, not as archive or narrative, but in constantly shifting constellations organized by topic, theory, and speaker.
I think part of me knew that I was, because I had slammed with a girl on the yard who had AIDS, who had kept it a secret. And consequently, she died like 6 months after we tested.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. 6 months after I...
The piece is organized around three aporia, irresolvable internal contradictions surrounding the prison industrial complex that place the statements of the incarcerated women in dialogue with the writings of theorists including Angela Davis and Giorgio Agamben.
Addiction and that cycle of abuse, and you know, once you see it, and it takes a minute, I think, for
Users are able to view a transcript for each statement, explore a complete set of statements from one speaker, or pursue topical and thematic connections to new groups of content.
I don't want to be here. I have no business here. You know, I said, and it makes it very...
Instead of imagery, the interface is constructed out of quotes from the women themselves, whose statements testify to their struggles in a way that disrupts conventional documentary practice, while creating a sonic texture whose complex interweaving underpins Daniel's abolitionist argument.
So there are secrets that are kept from the public, and then there are public secrets, secrets that the public keeps safe from itself. A good example is President Clinton's unfortunate policy on gays in the military that was called "Don't Ask, Don't Tell." The trick to the public secret is knowing what not to know. And this is the most powerful form of social knowledge. In the U.S., the injustices of the war on drugs, of the criminal justice system, of the prison industrial complex are public secrets. The public perception of justice relies on not acknowledging that which is generally known. And when we're faced with massive sociological problematic phenomena such as racism, poverty, addiction, and abuse, it's easier to slip into denial. That's the ideological work that the prison does. It allows us to avoid the ethical by relying on the juridical. In the state of California alone, there are currently 33 adult prisons. There are 13 adult community facilities, 8 juvenile facilities that house over 165,000 adult prisoners. These are statistics that are probably at this moment already out of date. Recent news reports estimate that 1 out of every 100 people in the U.S. is currently incarcerated. And as the number of prisons increases, so does the level of secrecy about what goes on inside them. The California Department of Corrections' ongoing prison media ban, in place since 1993, eliminates prisoners' rights to confidential correspondence with media representatives, and it bars the use of cameras, recording devices, and even writing instruments in interviews. So I visit as a legal advocate with a nonprofit organization called Justice Now. And as a legal advocate, I'm allowed to record my conversations with the women and solicit their stories, ideas, and opinions. My conversations with these women form the basis of public secrets. I just want to play you a clip that helps make this argument.
I'm saying that people do commit wrong. I know that. I know that, you know. And I know they got to have a place for the real wrongs. But everything else could be dealt with in another mannerism through the courts. You know. I'm not saying that I want somebody to then chop somebody's body up running around doing it again. I'm not saying that. But the majority of the women that are in here, there's survival. You know, survival. For whatever reason they had to survive like that, they just survived like that. They haven't done anything horrific, and it's been on TV and all that kind of stuff. There's nobodies that just committed a nobody's crime and ended up in a nobody's prison, okay? So they don't need that much space when they limit it to who will be here and who won't. You know, that'd only be like 3% of people that's here would be staying, you know? The rest would be gone. Home, their families, you know, really. Because it's stupid. You know, they had a rock in their hand, so they're doing 25 to life. You know, I mean, it didn't deter them from smoking rock because people still out there doing it. So what was the point of taking a mother, a woman, somebody's child, putting them in the prison for 25 to life because they had a nickel rock? When you really look at it and you go to everybody's case, 3% of people should be helped. Not so much as locked up, but helped, because there's definitely something wrong. And giving you medication to make you sleep past what it is that's wrong with you is not an option here. They need professional help.
So I'm just going to show you a
my
few
personal story,
of the screens
and I know you could
views that are
probably
drawn
find
from the
so many
database
people like
automatically.
me. I mean, like, if
This
you could
is
just, like,
Life
get passed
Outside,
and do this
in
on
which
the
the
yard,
women tell their
you could probably
stories
find so
of
many
their
women,
backgrounds,
especially
their
women,
encounters
you know,
with
and I'm not
regimes of
downplaying men,
enforcement, their educational
physiologically,
difficulties, their problems with
different when
poverty,
it comes to dealing with emotions.
alcoholism,
But
drug
you can
addiction.
find so many women who at one point or another, before they ever committed a crime, said help. I can think of numerous times when the cops would pick me up and take me home when I was a teenager. I said, help, I'm being abused here. At that time, now, emotional and mental abuse is so recognized, but when I was a teenager, and that was only, what, let me see, how old am I, 14 years ago? Oh, no, I just need to stay home and bear with it. Why can't I just do what my parents tell me? Well, because I pretty much don't want to be pregnant and out on a street corner like they keep swearing I'll be. You know.
In topical views, like this one on malpractice, the women talk about issues of their experience inside the prison. Medical malpractice is one of
And
the
I really
most
believe that
troubling
these people are
problems
trained,
that the women
you know,
face.
prisoners are liars and everything they say is bullshit. And to the point of telling who I'm going to tell you about, who you asked me about, that she's responsible.
So a topical view will
started
lead
me
to a content flow
on
view.
this mission that I'm on, of being an activist and an advocate for people who either don't speak up, won't speak up, or don't know how. As this trip to prison, this 6th term, has been very, very difficult.
In the content flow, clips are connected through themes and threads, authors.
The lifers today don't have nothing. Nothing. And it's like they put them in a building and said, here, sit. So then years down the road, when you turn around and go before the board, why don't you have a vocation? Why weren't you in the psych groups? Why don't you have family time?
I'm going to let this play so that you can see how the structure of the project closes out. We hope that you'll follow your own
She's
kind
been
of
down
narrative.
for 20 years, and the oldest daughter is 23, so she's been gone since she was 3 years old, and the youngest daughter is here who's 20, and she was newborn. And they have never had contact with their mother until now, and they really still don't have a wonderful relationship, because when she got here, well, when all of them got here, she didn't want to talk to any of them.
She didn't want to see him.
She doesn't know how to be a mother. She's been in prison for 20 years. She dropped 8 kids and promptly went to prison for life. Has 2 sons in prison.
And when you've followed your narrative through, we hope that you'll go to the exit, which is kind of the closure of the project. Sometimes the recordings end abruptly. Visitation is called for the count at 3:30 p.m. The door opens. Conversation stops. The guard comes in. I turn off the recorder and gather my things quickly. The woman I am speaking with is taken back inside. She may be forced to endure a pat search, a strip search, even a visual body cavity search, which can be performed by a male guard. It's entirely up to the guard. I try not to think about this as I walk out into the afternoon heat. It angers and disgusts me. I feel guilty and relieved. I am free to go. As I walk down the rose-lined path, I try to think about my plans for the evening. I imagine going out for a drink, shopping, a movie, pleasure, and choice. I actually started thinking about it early this morning before I left the house. I always do, before a visit. In anticipation and hesitation, I recognize the refugee, the prisoner that I am. There are wild rabbits on the lawn at this time of day. They must come in from the desert. They have no difficulty passing through the $3 million razor wire fence. The electronic gates are opened for me, one after another. I pass through the metal detector and I'm outside, released. On the blacktop parking lot, the car has become a convection oven. We open the doors to let it air out, but a voice over a loudspeaker from one of the guard towers insists we move on. We speed down the farm road toward Los Banos and strip mall fast food. By the time we pull up at the Dairy Queen, a Friday night high school football game is beginning across the street. One of the legal advocates is interested in the game. Her high school played against Los Banos High. The marching band begins to play. I wonder, what sort of topological deformation makes it possible for these two spaces to exist in such proximity? Does this picture of middle-class play and complacence depend on the existence of suffering and oppression at the prison? While we stand and listen to the cheering across the street, I try to recall a quote. It was something like, "If you have come here to help, you are wasting your time. If you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then..." I can't quite remember the wording, but I know my life is bound to the lives of these women. I can't be free until they are free. None of us can really be safe until they are safe. No citizen can honestly claim their inalienable rights until all people can share in them. So if you do take the trouble to listen to the exit voiceover narration, it dumps you into this what you can do section, which tells you a few things if you've been convinced by the abolitionist argument or at least are interested in prison reform issues, organizations that you can join, how to write your legislator, what kind of argument to make to your local legislator about decarceration. There's also a topical interface if you've become engaged with some issue like medical malpractice, but your kind of narrative of navigation took you elsewhere and you didn't hear much about it, you can go back to the topical interface and sort of do research on a particular topic, and that will take you right back into different views of the database that are relevant to that topic. So I can take like an hour and a half to present this project, and I usually go off on my rant about prison abolition and the criminal justice system. That's not quite the appropriate content for this kind of talk, I don't think, but this is an example of my approach to the use of information technology in the service of society. And so I'm going to skip through some of my rant about prison abolition in order to show you a little bit of developing work on the next two new media documentaries. This is just a quote from Catherine McKinnon, which I think really closes the project quite well, because I think that the human and systemic and economic and political abuses of the prison are atrocities, and they're atrocities that are both too violating and too ordinary to be accepted. I'll show you the URL for Public Secret. I hope that you would be interested in going back. It's like I think the demo tape says, there are like almost 600 audio clips from the interviews inside, and a number of other textual pieces that are engaged in the discourse. So, and each navigation of the site is somewhat unique because the views are generated algorithmically from the database. The next project, which is near completion right now, is titled Blood Sugar, where Public Secrets reveals the secret injustices of the prison industrial complex. Blood Sugar examines the social and political construction of poverty, alienation, and addiction in America through the eyes of those who live it. I've been working with an HIV prevention clinic and needle exchange organization in Oakland for a number of years, and I've recorded over 40 hours of conversations that I've had with their clients, injection drug users who primarily live on the street. And just to give you an example of what that's like, because I don't want to take too long on this, I'll just play a quick clip, representative clip.
And it's just an ongoing struggle, and I don't know who's going to win, you know. And I know how heroin is. I'm going to lose every time. I'm either going to be in the hospital or I'm going to be in jail. And sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes a month. You know, and I don't know personally how to stop. I'm a pretty strong person, but I don't know how to beat this one. And it's because the drug is so powerful, it really takes over your whole. It's not recreational word. My body feels high and I'm having fun and I'm laughing and and I'll recuperate tomorrow and go to work on Monday. Sunday rolls into Monday, and it's a drug used where you can deal with your life, not to add to life. Like as if you drink alcohol at a party. Heroin's not like that. Heroin you get up with and you eat it like breakfast, and then you eat it like lunch and it puts you to bed at night. And any comfortable feeling that you're going to have, any sort of comfortability or comfort level that it's going to give you, that's how bad it's going to make you feel when you don't have it.
So these are just a few screenshots of the interface that's in development. The interviews are represented by these kind of audio bodies. People like Tanya don't want to be seen for obvious reasons, but they do want to be heard. And I think theirs are the most important voices in the discourse, public discourse around addiction and the drug war and drug policy in the United States. And the argument of the piece takes on issues of social and biological influence. Is addiction a brain disease? What do we hold against the drug addict? What are the social constructions around addiction? Why are certain addictions acceptable and others not? And also looks at the connections between the life stories of people who have genetic predispositions as well as social kinds of contexts that lead to the disease of addiction. And then the third project, which has recently been is supported by Tribeca Film Institute New Media Fellowship, is called Capitalist Punishment, and it's a project about prison labor. So I'm going back into the prisons when Blood Sugar is complete, but in this case I will be interviewing prisoners who do prison labor in all of the state prisons in California. So it's going to take a little while to develop that because it's slow going getting into the prisons and doing the recording. But Capitalist Punishment and the Social Cost Price Tracker are kind of companion works. That the Social Cost Price Tracker will be something that is part of the Capitalist Punishment project. So Capitalist Punishment will be a museum installation of products that are produced by prison laborers, which strangely enough I can buy through the prison system because I'm an employee of the state of California. And I'm going to have them altered with industrial print processes and industrial embroidery processes and various different ways in which it is appropriate depending on the object produced, to transform the object with literally the words of the prisoner who made it about their experience in prison labor. That will be part of a multimedia museum tour that will use a handheld device to access an archive of audio recordings of relevant statements made by prison laborers, and some explanation of the prison industrial complex in terms of the network of private corporations and the state and their complicity in what is essentially the new and more acceptable version of the institution of slavery. And then there'll be a locative media interface, and that is the Social Cost Price Tracker for cell phones and handhelds that will function. And I'm working on this with an associate professor of computer science at UC Santa Cruz named James Davis. Our two research groups will be collaborating on this project, and they have already developed a sort of barcode reader, cell phone camera barcode reader software that will allow people to read the barcodes of objects in retail stores and then pull information from a database about that object relative to whatever you might want to give feedback on, but in this case it'll be about labor practices and particularly prison labor practices. So we've got a long way to go on that, but it's a really interesting project, and we'll have in the cell phone, play back on the cell phone through the database the audio recordings of the prison laborers and their commentary on their experience as prison laborers. So just to close, okay, what can art do? And that is really my relevance, I guess, to this series. In my writing and my creative practice, I refuse to stand outside the context I provide, as you've heard my voice throughout this presentation, both in the projects as well as explaining them. As a context provider, I'm really more of an immigrant than an ethnographer, crossing over from the objective to the subjective, from the theoretical to the anecdotal, from authority to unauthorized alien. And as an academic, I was once really reluctant to include my own story in my work, both in my writing and in my projects. But my position is not and cannot be neutral in theory or in practice. That would be truly an impossible place. So I've crossed over into what I call anecdotal theory, along with theorists such as Jane Gallup and Michael Taussig, where theorizing and storytelling together constitute an intervention and a refusal to accept reality as it is. So by employing a polyphony of voices, including my own, in order to try to challenge audiences to rethink the paradoxes of social exclusion and that attend the lives of those who suffer from poverty and racism, addiction, and incarceration, my work, I hope, will fulfill the role that I think new media documentary practices and information technologies should play, practices of context provision, practices that involve empowering speech, changing perceptions, asking tough questions, and making radical demands. So to understand my projects as works of art or as research or as scholarship, one must really move from questions of aesthetics, like what is beauty, or ontology, what is art, to questions of pragmatism and ethics, what can art do? Thank you. course. Okay.
What's the process you use to select the groups that you work with?
Well, it's somewhat personal and slightly random. When I began working with the Needle Exchange organization in Oakland, I lived down the street from their former facility when they were burned out by an arsonist that they believed had been hired by our local city council representative, who wanted them desperately to move out of their facility because he saw them as wrecking his gentrification project, the Fruitvale Transit Village. I don't know if any of you ever been to Fruitvale, but I lived in an artist loft space, and I mean a real artist loft space, not a lawyer loft space. It was like a dump. It was a big factory building. So I was down the street from this Needle Exchange Day Service Center. And the people who went there were kind of my neighbors. You know, they lived on the street, but they were my neighbors. And when I sort of saw this happening, I thought, is there a practical kind of way in which I could engage this problem? And initially I started going to the Needle Exchange, and I met the people who used the services, and I tried to do a technology access project, which was completely unrealistic and went on for years, and it was very interesting research, but people who live on the street and are addicted to heroin can't really come in and work in a computer lab on a regular basis and make their own web pages. So that was the failure of that, and so I started this more kind of directly ethnographic kind of interview approach and decided to turn it into an online audio archive. And the Prison Project actually came out of that. I became interested in the lives of the people I was engaging with and how they moved between the street and the county and state institutions, and I got to know Angela Davis, my colleague, and some other anti-prison activists, and they started getting me into the prison, and that's how I chose those groups. Argentina was also just an opportunistic thing. But I'm interested in general in poverty and disenfranchisement, and so there are lots of different communities that I can engage around that interest.
Question?
Oh. You touched on this a little bit in your question that you just answered, but how do you see your work as compared to sort of more traditional photo voice type projects?
Yeah, well, I think my work is really influenced by photo voice type projects. I think earlier in the presentation I mentioned Wendy Ewald, whose work that was originally supported by Polaroid in schools in West Virginia with adolescent students. Really, I found that approach, handing the camera over and letting someone self-document and self-represent. I've been very compelled by that. And I've collaborated with photo voice projects. One of the Pabas communities is through Community Works West, which does a photo voice project with young people whose parents are incarcerated. And so I got involved in that for a while, and we did video and photo. Photo's a lot easier to do than video. And more aesthetically, there's more resolution in a way. The video, though, I think is kind of more raw and temporal and, whatever. So, yeah. Yes?
Who do you find is using the Pabas website? Who's visiting it, and what do you think they're getting out of it? I can see what the people who are involved in making it get out of it, but how about the users?
What would a visitor get out of it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't track hits on it, which probably I should do. I'll think about that. But it's been exhibited in a number of different kinds of festivals and arts venues and so forth. And so I think people who encounter it in that context, they're sort of looking, they're browsing. And that's kind of an ethical dilemma, is that, and it's a question for me still, is that creating some opportunity for understanding and awareness, or is it voyeuristic? Now, the participants can choose which videos they want online or not, but those choices aren't always made with thorough understanding and deep consideration, because the participants don't always have an online life, you know. So it's a set of complicated issues that, like, I've been working with this Danum Collaborative Research Project Group, and we spent like a whole quarter just talking about that. Well, what should we do? Should we protect it? And the new design, in a way, arises out of like steps that will be built into the workshops that are supposed to develop more consciousness of what's being put out where, and more opportunities to just close it off and make it a tool. A lot of the projects that we've done have been related to performance projects, like with CREAR in Argentina. They've done the video, and then they've exported the video and incorporated it into a dance theater presentation, which is also, though, usually very community-based. And we did that in Germany with a group of Argentinians and a group of Germans, and in this kind of community center. And so there is a public, you know, that then gets access to it in that way, and then they go to the site and explore more. But we actually use the interface as the backdrop for the dance theater productions in a couple of instances.
Is it available? I mean, are you open to other collaborations?
Oh, absolutely.
So
yeah.
The tool is available to, let's say, if someone wanted to put it in a new environment?
Yeah, they just need to contact me. I'm working with a couple of new groups now, the Center for Multicultural Cooperation in Fresno, and in the new design we're going to have up front, like, you want to start a new community, click here, you know, and that's the way to go. But the current interface is pretty much like the art exhibit presentation interface. It's not very communicative, unfortunately.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Sharon. We really
thank
appreciate
you.
it. This is great.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to get in touch with Professor